Good morning. Obviously, today's theme is God is bigger. When Grace and I met a couple weeks ago, it became more and more apparent as she shared her story about all her different adventures that God is bigger. And then I had come across a story that was really powerful about the bigness of God. And then I had prayed, Lord, I said I really wanted something that would hit home here for us. And in this past week, two major God is bigger moments occurred. And I wanted to share it with you because they are people that are here within our body that they occurred with, which makes it even more powerful. There's a family that has been divided by hundreds of miles. The husband and wife have been living in different towns. The kids have been living between them. And they, for the past 2 years, they had come to me and we had been praying and praying that God somehow would bring them together. And they've had so many different struggles and obstacles to overcome as they've been trying to hold their family together. And just this past week, they came to me to share how God is bigger. Because he had been interviewing for a job here, and as he interviewed for this job, he said, but I need this exact amount of money in order to move. And that's unheard of for this job in this location. And the wife goes, but God. And so they prayed, and then he got a call that he got the job for the exact amount of money that he needed. God is bigger. And that family now is joined together and going to be back together, not separated by miles and miles. And then there was somebody in our midst this week that 2 weeks ago, they got a really horrible diagnosis. And this diagnosis was that they probably would not live another 6 months to a year. And it was extremely heavy. And they went back to the doctor, and they went and they got a second opinion. And wouldn't you know that the diagnosis was wrong? And that she was able to share that what they saw on the brain MRI was really just dust and not a fatal disease. God is bigger than what we can think or imagine. And then I reflect that now it has been 6 weeks. It has been 6 weeks since Pastor Dennis has left. And you as a church body, together, we have bridged a gap for 6 weeks, as next week we welcome Pastor Dan and his wife. What a beautiful thing it has been to see how everybody has pitched in, staff and lay people alike, to continue to let our light as Grace Church shine. Blessings to each one of you for that. And to me, that shows the bigness of God. And so, of course, this morning as we go to enter his word, we are going to be in 1 Samuel 17. And as we open it, let us pray. Father, I pray, Lord, that every word be your word, that your word will transform my life and those here, that we will see you coming off the pages of the living word. Thank you that we can share in your word today, knowing that your presence, your Holy Spirit is here to guide us. Thank you. Open our hearts and minds in Jesus' name. Amen. So, of course, this is a very familiar story. Everybody has heard about the Israelites and the Philistines, and they were at a valley, and they would come out to a battleground, and there was the Israelites on one side and the Philistines on the other side. And there was a hill, and then this champion named Goliath came out, and it describes how tall he is and his gear and his sword and everything like that. He was 9'9", and I was thinking, well, I'm 5'2.5", and yes, the half counts. So that means he has to be 4 feet 5.5 inches taller than me. So he was huge. Then on top of it, they said his armor alone weighed 179 pounds. His spear alone weighed 32 pounds. He was big. So you have to imagine that his vocal cords had to be big. So when he yelled, he was heard. And Goliath in verse 8 of 1 Samuel 17 says, Goliath stood and shouted to the ranks of Israel, why do you come out and line up for battle? Am I not a Philistine? And are you not the servants of Saul? Choose a man and have him come down to me. If he's able to fight and kill me, we will become your subjects. But if I overcome him and kill him, you will become our subjects and serve us." Then the Philistines said, "This day I defy the armies of Israel. Give me a man, let us fight each other." On hearing the Philistines' words, Saul and all the Israelites were dismayed and terrified. They were dismayed and terrified. And this Philistine came out for 40 days, and he would make the same statement every morning and every night. So a total of 80 times he had said this, and each time they were terrified and dismayed. It says in verse 24, it says, "Whenever the Israelites saw the man, they all fled from him with great fear." Now the Israelites had been saying in verse 25, "Do you see how this man keeps coming out? He comes out to defy Israel. The king will give great wealth to the man who kills him. He will also give from his daughter in marriage and will exempt his family from the taxes in Israel." Now David, he was a shepherd, and he was out in the field, and his dad Jesse had called to him and told him to bring some cheese and bread and stuff up to the battlefield and see what was going on. So David left his sheep with another shepherd, and he came to the battlefield. And when he had everything he had, he took it to the place where they would have the bread and they would have the cheese, and left it there and went out to see what was going on. Of course, he was curious. And David saw and heard the same thing Saul and all the Israelites had heard for the past 40 days. And David asked the men standing near him, "What will be done for the man who kills this Philistine and removes this disgrace from Israel? Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of" what? "The living God." David points out, who should defy God? I don't really know if David even recognized or saw Goliath. All he knew is he was defying God, the living God. And he was seeing God over the giant. You know, with his size and with everything else, sometimes we can relate to giants in our life. And I didn't put this up here because I thought you would be covered, but on the other side of this board, I listed some things that we sometimes have as giants in our life. And sometimes they can be things like anxiety or worry, but it can be things as food and diet and exercise and doubt. There's so many things that we can have as giants in our life that we don't even realize we have. And we focus on these things. And these things can sometimes be in our homes. It could be in our workplace. It could be in our church. It can be anywhere. And sometimes we focus on the symptoms of those things, bills that we can't pay, or debts that we can't, or addictions that we have, or our past becomes our present and future. And you know, as we look at these giants that may be in our life, maybe we can think about like David. God is a living God who is bigger than these things. But now, of course, David had an older brother who happened to be around when he was anointed king. And this brother was obviously on the battlefield and part of Israelites' army. And he chimes in. In verse 28, he says, "Why have you even come down here? And with whom do you leave those few sheep in the wilderness?" Mocking what David did, mocking his career as a shepherd. And goes on to say, "I know how conceited you are and how wicked your heart is. You came down only to watch the battle." Do you think there was jealousy there? Do you think there's animosity there? Comes so strong and out. But what's interesting to me is the older brother did something that we sometimes do. We don't allow someone to even say a word. David never had a chance in that time period to say why he was there, to explain anything. The older brother just made an assumption and went right after him. Sometimes we do that too. We make assumptions when we see or hear something instead of understanding the heart and why. And this older brother did that. But what was interesting is this other brother is part of the Israelite army. He must have been dismayed and terrified with Goliath. And obviously he saw that his brother wasn't. But David, he didn't skip a beat. In verse 29, he says, "What have I done?" said David. "Can't I even speak?" He then turned away to someone else and brought up the same matter. And the men answered him as before. What David said was overheard and reported to Saul, and Saul sent for him. So it was overheard. Saul calls for him. David said to Saul, "Let no one lose heart on account of this Philistine. Your servant will go and fight him." Boy, David steps up. He says, "Don't you lose heart. I'll go fight him." He already had the king's heart. He already was developing that heart within him. He was encouraging the people, "Don't worry about it. I'm going to go fight." Of course, you're wondering what the people were thinking, because he was just a young boy and here was this giant, and they were all terrified. And what did Saul do? Saul says, "You're not able to go out against this Philistine and fight him. You're only a young man, and he's been a warrior from youth." Wow. Don't we do that sometimes? Don't we make people question? You know, it says that God doesn't call the equipped. He equips the called. And we can't let people say, "Well, you're too young," or "You don't have enough knowledge," or "You can't do that." It is not any of us doing any of it when we're going in the name of the Lord. He was a young boy and he knew it, but he knew God was bigger. He knew who he served. Let us not discourage one another in our faith. Let us encourage one another. Yes, you can, because we have a God who can. So we have a God who can, and on top of it, we have a God who will. And David says this to Saul. And here is David's statement of faith that is so powerful. "Your servant has been keeping his father's sheep," in verse 34. "When a lion or a bear came and carried off a sheep from the flock, I went after it. I struck it and rescued the sheep from its mouth. When it turned on me, I seized it by its hair, struck it, and killed it. Your servant has killed both the lion and the bear. This uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, because," why? "He has defied the armies of the living God. The Lord who rescued me from the paw of the lion and the paw of the bear will rescue me from the hand of this Philistine." He will. David shared how God had been training him. David shared how God had rescued him. Do you realize each of us sitting here today has walked such a different walk in our lives, and that he has prepared each one of you to fight your battles and your giants by what he has allowed in your life? And he has trained you. And he has trained you and equipped you to walk forth to conquer your giants. And Saul said, "Okay, go. The Lord be with you." And then, don't we do this? Saul dressed him in verse 38 in his own tunic. He put a coat of armor on him and a bronze helmet on his head. David fastened on his sword over the tunic, and then he tried to walk around. He wasn't used to this. Here was this heavy tunic. Don't we sometimes try to fight our battles like someone else fights their battles? Or we decide we're going to, well, you know what? They have this prayer closet, so it must be the closet. I'm going to go pray in their prayer closet because God's going to answer me there. It doesn't matter. David was trying to walk around and conquer this giant with someone else's tools, with someone else's armor. We each have our own armor. We each have our own tools. We have our own training ground to fight those battles. We can't take someone else's. It's all about our personal walk, our personal relationship with Jesus that equips us. Be who God created you to be, not what someone else tells you to be. So it goes on, and David tells him, "I can't go in this stuff," he said to Saul, "because I'm not used to them." So what did he took? He took them off. He took a staff in his hand, 5 smooth stones, from the stream of Elah, which actually came from there, a shepherd's bag, and a sling in his hand, and he went to approach the Philistine. I'm really not going to make this go. But the point in being is he took what he knew. He took what he knew. That's all we need to do, is take what we know. We need to take what we know. Now, meanwhile, it says, as it goes on in verse 41, the Philistine with his shield bearer in front of him kept coming closer and closer to David. He looked David over, and what did he do? He said, "Am I a dog that you come at me with sticks?" And the Philistine cursed David by his gods. "Come here," he said, "and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals." Doesn't our problems sometimes taunt us? Don't they sometimes come back at us? Sometimes doesn't things kind of get worse? But David refuted it with his statement of faith again. In verse 45, it says, "You come against me with the sword and the spear and the javelin, but I come against you in the name of the Lord Almighty, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defied. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll strike you down and cut off your head. This very day I will give the carcasses of the Philistine army to the birds and the wild animals," using the exact same words the giant had used. "And the whole world will know what? That there is a what? God in Israel. All these gathered here will know that not by sword or by spirit, or by spear, not by sword or by spear that the Lord saves. For the battle is the Lord, and he will give all of you unto my hands." David came in the name of the Lord, bold, and he laid out the pure facts that God was going to deliver him, and it was going to be all about God because the Lord saves. And we know in 2 Chronicles that the battle is the Lord's. And as the Philistine moved closer to attack him, David ran right to his giants. David said it ran quickly toward the battle line to meet him, and reaching into his bag and taking out a stone, he slung it and struck that Philistine on the forehead. And that stone sank into his forehead. And what happened? He fell forward. He didn't fall back. Here is something being thrown at him, and the natural way would be to throw back. He threw that stone, and he fell face down forward to prove it was God who did that. And it fulfilled in verse 47 where he said, "You would not be won by sword or spear, but by God, by that single stone." And David ran to him and stood over him. And he took that sword and he cut off his head like he said he would do. And then what happened to all the other ones in that field? They ran. They ran. You know, as I flip this, I'm hoping it's going to flip over fine. I might need somebody on the other side, but it might flip fine. Oops. These are our giants, and we know that God is bigger. But I wanted to put God there to make you realize that sometimes the first stone doesn't knock our giants down. Sometimes it might take the second, third, or fourth stone. And just because God is bigger doesn't mean that all of them have disappeared. You can still see them. But we know, just like David, he focused on God. He didn't focus on those giants. What's interesting, by David focusing on God, David mentioned God 9 times. He didn't even use Goliath's name. Twice he mentioned the Philistine. That is 4.5 to 1 ratio. God was the focus of David. All the Israelites' army and Saul, they were focused on the giant, and they were terrified, and they were run. They didn't fight. But David looked to God. Do we look to God? Do we understand his mercy and forgiveness, or do we sit around in guilt? Do you think of God's grace? Do you think of all the blessings that are in your life, or is your list of complaints more? Do you focus on your sickness or your circumstance or your problem, or do you focus on God who can wipe out all of those and walk alongside of you and carry you through all those giants? He'll fight for you because he'll deliver you from the giant. You know, all we need is one rock. You know, and there's so many rocks for us to look at. Everywhere we walk, we can use the symbolism of the rock because all we need is the one stone. David just needed one stone, and so do we. And that one stone has Jesus' name on it. Jesus is our rock. He is the one that can deliver us. And on your form, it says, God is bigger blank. And it's truly blank because each of you have something in your life that you need God to be bigger than. And according to Ephesians 3:20, it says, now to him who is able to do immeasurably more than whatever we can think or imagine. God is the same God today and tomorrow. God has given us every tool to defeat our enemy. And those tools come in three: prayer, faith, and the Word of God. All three of those together will get it done. Because prayer is our weapon. The Word is living and active. And it says in Hebrews 4:12 how living and active it is. And when Jesus was tempted in the desert, what did he do? He quoted the Word of God. In Philippians 1:6, it says, be confident that he who began a good work in you is going to complete it. You know what? The struggles are real. All of us have struggles, and that struggle is real. But the biggest thing is, God is real. And God is bigger. God is bigger than any disappointment, pain, or hurt. He is bigger. And one of the ways that today we are going to celebrate in understanding this, that he is that stone, he is that rock, is that sin separated us from our eternal God. And only Jesus, the perfect sacrifice, can give us eternal life. And so today, as we come to the table,